Welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. Hello everyone, I hope you're okay. Whether you be listening on YouTube or on Dark Matter Digital Network, Deep Talk Radio, or Alien Dreams, or any other place that's playing our episodes. As we speak, I'm just reading the news, and Turkey has just sent more tanks into northern Syria in operation against the Islamic State, according to Turkish media reports. The tanks crossed the border near the Turkish town of Kilis, and apparently there's been the sound of military engagement and plumes of smoke, and civilians were seen fleeing as the Turkish military advanced, according to the BBC. And we're going to be talking more about that towards the end of our episode today. But first we're going to continue with the same theme as last episode. Last episode we talked about some controversial topics. And there were a few that we didn't fit on to last week's episode, so we're going to play them today. And we're going to start off with, should religious symbols be worn in public? And we're going to be talking about the bikini ban, basically. Remember, you can make your views known by going to our website and adding your messages to our chat room or leaving a voicemail. That's www.truthsentinel.co.uk. We love to hear from you. You can also email me anytime, scottsentinel9@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening to today's show. Hope you enjoy it. Let's go to our first discussion about the bikini ban. Banning symbols of religion in public. Should costumes of religion be banned in public? And I'm in particular talking about the example which has been on lots of news outlets. Cannes Mayor David Lisnard has banned burkinis, which is a kind of all-in-one suit covering the legs, covering most of your body really, covering around the head as well, on French beaches, and tried to explain his decision by saying the burkini is like a uniform, a symbol of Islamist extremism, and that's why I'm banning it for the summer. This has caused a lot of discussion on social networks, and also led to some really strange situations. You may have seen a photo on I saw it on BBC, but I'm sure it's elsewhere, of 4 armed police surrounding a Muslim woman on a beach in France, demanding that she, well, some people say they didn't demand that she remove her clothes, they just wanted to administer a fine. But the photograph shows her removing some of her clothes, so she was obviously affected by them turning up. It just seems like a really silly situation. But I'm sure there's people listening who might have opposite points of views to that. I think that's a silly situation, 4 grown men telling a woman that she needs to expose her flesh on the beach. And I thought it was kind of strange that probably on a beach in Saudi Arabia there's probably someone else being told to cover up. It's just an example of the strangeness of the human race. On the one hand, I do think, again, it's not a black and white issue. On the one hand, I think it's a shame that people feel the need to cover up their bodies. So I do understand that side of things. As Phil said, it would be good that we could accept our bodies as just natural without going too far, like I said, and walking down the street naked. We shouldn't be ashamed of them, although there are limits, as I just said. I have been referring to a US guy called Luis Andrew Martinez, actually, who was an activist, who was known as the naked guy, basically from California, and he used to walk around naked and often got arrested. We had a guy in the UK, forgotten his name unfortunately, who did the same. I do think, in relation to this topic though, the full veil could be considered a symbol of oppression, no matter how hard people argue that it's their personal choice. I'm sure some people don't mind wearing the full face veil. But I would say that you could definitely argue that it has its roots in oppression from men and religion telling people that that's the way you should be. And after some time, it's become ingrained into a culture, so women might think it's normal and actually accept it. However, to focus on the main topic, I do think that it is not the way to go to ban the burkini on beaches. Really, then, as someone else pointed out, have to ban nuns wearing clothes on beaches. In fact, wouldn't you have to ban people wearing clothes on beaches in general? I mean, people link this to religion, but I don't really think when people think of extremist terrorism events, they think of burkinis. I think that it's a really strange thing to do, and I think Anthony will probably argue it's provocative in a moment, which I think it is. It's a bit bizarre, I think. No matter what you think, it's a very strange leap to make. I think at the end of the day, people can choose what they want to wear, even on a beach, and if they want to cover up as part of their religion, it's up to them. It's impractical, maybe. If I saw someone wearing a full gown in 40 degrees heat, I'd think, why the hell are you doing that? But it doesn't really have to bother me that much, does it really? I can just get on with whatever I'm doing. Whether a nation should resist adapting to different cultures is another topic that's linked to this. France is obviously having some issues because of some of the events that have occurred in France. They're having issues adapting to other cultures coming in, and so are some other countries as well. And I think that is partly due to the changing world we live in, and these clashes are almost an inevitable part of that change.
Yeah, look, there's so much to say about this topic, much more than we can possibly say in this episode, I think. But let me say, first of all, on one level, it's very, very simple. People have the right to wear whatever they want in a free country. France considers itself to be a country which is founded on the principles of freedom. For France to be banning this burkini is basically proving that it is going increasingly against the principles on which the Republic is founded. And I think it's ridiculous. There's no reason to ban the burkini at all. Absolutely none. It's just an issue of it's an issue of freedom. And that's it. Okay, so that's the simple answer. But I wanted to say a couple of other things. First thing is, I think the burkinis are beautiful. I think they're really stylish. I've looked at a lot of them on the internet in preparation for this story, and I really like them. So I'm sorry if that offends anyone, but I think they're probably some of the more stylish swimwear you're going to see on French beaches.
Certainly better than the trunks I wear.
But look, the third thing I want to say, and this is probably going to throw the cat amongst the pigeons, this is yet another example of the French government's war on Islam. They have, over the last 10 to 15 years, carried out a sustained attack on their Muslim minority. It's the largest Muslim population in Europe. Before recent times, they were very well integrated. They were respected. You can find many symbols in France, going back, to older times, many symbols of how much the Muslim minority was valued as a part of French society. And French society has turned a corner in the last 10 to 15 years and gone in a completely different direction, mostly for political expediency, where they've basically turned on their Muslim population and they're attacking them in any way possible. Now, I was reading earlier today, for example, the Italian foreign minister has attacked the French policy towards Muslims, French policies, plural, towards Muslims, and saying this approach is absolutely not working and it's causing all kinds of fallout across the continent. Now, I personally think it's getting to the point now where the rest of the EU has to turn around and say to France, enough, you are causing murderous attacks, not just on your own soil, but on our soil as well. You're causing our citizens to be attacked with your deliberately exclusionary, bigoted policies. And if you don't stop this, then the next Brexit is going to be a Frexit, because we can't have hundreds and hundreds of people being killed around Europe because of what the French government is doing to its Muslim minority. We just can't have that. If you look at the policies of other countries, you can look at the policy of Denmark, for example. They've had they've had their share of issues with the Muslim immigrant population, the cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad and so on. There was a shooting in Copenhagen a couple of years ago. They've had their issues, but their policy is one of engagement, working together. The Danish police force is even in touch with, even keeps regular contact with a mosque in Copenhagen, which openly says, we support the ideals, if not the practices, of the Islamic State. The Danish government has looked at that and gone, oh my God, that's frightening. We need to engage these people. They also focus very, very heavily on people from Denmark who have gone to Syria and other places to fight. Right? They focus on the families of those people, and they focus on the young men themselves when they come back, offering them all kinds of opportunities for psychological counseling and other things, because many of these guys go over there thinking that it's going to be a big adventure, and they come back horrified by what they've seen. And these kinds of policies so far seem to really be working. The French policy is the diametric opposite of that, and it's now reached the point where it's causing problems outside of France, and they need to be held accountable for that.
Well said. I think I've got a little bit of a, nuanced, different opinion on this one. But it's similar in certain respects. I think definitely we're not even going to get into all the quote-unquote conspiracy theory type things I've got about the French government promoting this war on Islam, as it were, is what you described. And genuinely, I think pretty much anybody that's done any research on the subject would agree with yourself on that one. However, I will say that my particular angle on the burkini situation here is I don't necessarily think they look so nice, but people, again, as we said, can wear anything they want within reason in a free, quote-unquote, country. But, of course, it's not exactly, France hasn't been a free country for quite a while. I mean, and what Anthony was describing there is post 9/11 France in the exact same way as anywhere else in Europe, especially Germany, has been going through this. It's this very anti-Islamic backlash, but of course this is totally contrived by the West in order to promote all these occupationary wars in North Africa and the Middle East. However, just on the subject of the burkini, the fact that my biggest thing here isn't just the government banning the burkini for the summer or whatever. It's the idea that nobody's voted on this, nobody's decided this, this has been no public perception sort of a thing, which, while I disagree with the idea of the public perception of saying that we should ban a certain article of clothing, I at very least think this should be something that's for the opinions of the average person on the street, or at least the majority of people. Not that necessarily the democracy idea of just voting on every little thing is the best idea in the world. However, it makes more sense than this one jerk-off, David Lisnard, deciding to unilaterally ban the burkini because he believes that it is a symbol of Islamist extremism, which really, that we're ever going to pretend that France is anything other than a right-wing military dictatorship under any other name is asinine. I mean, really, what the hell do you think is going on right now? How else do you think they can justify all the wars in the French drone strikes in North Africa or in the Middle East without as much racism as humanly possible, to the point where or rather bigotry as humanly possible, where they literally will take a single article of clothing, one of the silliest things they could try and address of this, and blowing it up as big as possible, trying to make it something that is the most gigantic issue in the world, but in reality, it's just par for the course in France.
Yeah, it's massively irresponsible considering the real and difficult issues that Europe is going through right now with the huge influx of immigrants from Syria and elsewhere. It's massively irresponsible of them to take this silly issue and turn it into yet another cause for conflict.
Yeah, and I'd echo those things as well, because it just seems like hypocrisy to me. He's saying it's a symbol of Islamist extremism. Well, that's not true. It's just a symbol of Islam, or for Islamist women. And whether I agree with it or not doesn't really matter. I really don't agree with Islamist women having to wear anything other than what they choose. But that's nothing, that's sort of by the by. But to say it's like an aspect of extremism, that's not true for one thing. But by trying to ban it, you're actually inciting extremism. You're actually creating what you're trying to fight against, it seems. And so it just seems a bit, it's a lot of stupidity. And my thoughts on it are just that people should wear what they want to wear. It's entirely up to them. And this particular rule is absolute hypocrisy.
Don't you mean, Phil, people shouldn't wear anything? Because earlier you were talking about being naked is the way to go.
I didn't say anything about being naked is the way to go. I think that's just the way you interpreted it. I think that's what you want.
Damn, I've been called out.
We're getting a window into Scott's mind now.
Oh my God, it's time to take a break. Just time for a quick break to tell you a bit about this show and let you know about some up-and-coming guests. Hello, I'm Scott, host of Truth Sentinel. We do weekly podcast shows covering topics connected to psychology, philosophy, political corruption, conspiracies, mysteries, world events, paranormal, and scientific advancements. Our episodes are recorded from diverse locations such as the UK, Ukraine, Israel, Egypt, Kazakhstan, Portugal, Vietnam, and Thailand. Find us on YouTube and also listen to us on the networks. Feel free to make a donation or buy a t-shirt, which gives us a small donation too. Use the code TRUTH1 for a 10% discount. Thanks for listening. That 10% discount for t-shirts can be found at trutht-shirts.com. That's trutht-shirts.com, and use the code TRUTH1 to get your 10% discount. and we get that small donation. You can also make donations at our website as well. I also wanted to talk about a very special guest we have coming on, none other than the great man himself, the Dice Man, Luke Reinhardt. Check out the book that was written in the 1970s, which changed the world and was a cult bestseller. It's about a man who throws a dice to decide everything he does. We're talking about the philosophy behind that and about his new book, which touches on a lot of the topics we talk about on our show. So I hope you join us and check us out again at www.truthsentinel.co.uk. Thanks for listening. Let's get on with today's show anyway. For an additional bonus topic today, we're going to talk about the boy in the ambulance. Many people may be aware of this shocking image that went viral around the world of the Syrian child pulled from the Aleppo rubble, basically. And there was a picture of this boy sitting on an orange chair, quite centrally, well-taken photograph by a journalist. This is the official story, that he was pulled from the rubble. You see him being taken from the rubble in the video, and he's put into the chair, and then it's focused on his face, and he's looking quite miserable and dejected. Caused one news anchor to even cry. That went viral as well, I think. I did actually find that quite moving, because I think that was real anyway. If we're going to talk about the conspiratorial angle in a minute of it not being totally real, perhaps being staged, certainly there was something a little bit contrived about it. We can at least say that. Anyway, the name of the 5-year-old was Omram Dagnish. He was pulled from a military strike on his home in rebel-held neighborhood, and the image shows him dusty and some people say not blooded, but he looks pretty bad to me. The conspiratorial angle is that this was all staged, basically, but there is another angle that appears to definitely be the case, and that's that the journalist who took the photo and has got accolades for it was Mahmoud Raslan, and it appears that he's also the same journalist that was seen in a photograph with some of the guys that beheaded the 12-year-old kid on the back of a pickup truck a couple of months back. Someone has pointed this out by identifying the faces and linking it to what they were wearing, the same clothes, and this was the same photojournalist. And so that ties in with the idea that perhaps this was propaganda, basically, at the very least. So, one version could be that, this was a real airstrike and he was pulled from the rubble, but here was Mahmoud Raslan waiting, not really caring about this child, which does seem to be clear from this, in the fact the boy's sitting there looking quite distraught, and there's no attempt by him to comfort him. It's obvious he's there for the photo shot. So at the very least, this is a journalist who doesn't have much empathy for the boy in question. And basically, I suppose the question here for this topic is, what are your thoughts on this story? Do you think it could have been staged? Do you think it could have been a propaganda stunt? And that's it, I guess, really. But first of all, we'll go over to Seth, who's got more information on this topic anyway, and can fill in some of the gaps.
I'd say, thank you, Scott. I'd say the most important one to get out of the way is to clarify that the media is attempting to portray the airstrike in question, or drone strike in question, as a Assad government or Free Syrian Army affiliated airstrike. That's what they're trying to say. So, of course, trying to put this on Assad as being some sort of the most horrible war criminal of all time, in the same way they'd vilified Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein or anybody like that before they go in and promote regime change, although they're already actively promoting regime change across Syria right now. Not that it's being the most successful thing in the world, as government forces that have been rather successful in pushing ISIS out of places like Aleppo. But who knows, with this new media sweep, I'm sure there'll be stepped up airstrikes from American planes and Saudi planes, and I'm sure anybody else that can get interested in it. But we'll see. However, a couple of the angles that I find very interesting here that nobody had really talked about with any of this stuff is that the boy in the ambulance photo happens to be about as perfectly staged as you could possibly get for these media guys, as far as they have the video footage perfectly and the pictures perfectly, without any rescue workers tending to this child, doing anything. They literally just set him in this chair, and of course the kid has no trouble holding on to the guy as they pull him out of the rubble there and everything, has him, sets him down in the chair, and leaves. And apparently leaves the back of this ambulance open for about, what has to be about a dozen of these ridiculous anti-government photojournalists to just stand there and take a god-awful amount of pictures and yell at this kid. So if this is a real incident, it's pretty perfectly staged, considering that the group that is responsible for a lot of this, of the rescue work, is actually a group called the White Helmets that are literally funded with tens of millions of dollars. I believe it was something like $27 million they'd received from the U.S. government, I believe last year, that these guys are supposed to be a completely impartial rescue group and all this type of stuff, that received tens of millions of dollars from the United States government, and I'm sure obviously have no interest in promoting regime change in Syria. Oh wait, that's literally their very purpose. That you could look up, entitled the White Helmets is the common colloquialism for them. I can't remember the exact name of what they go by, but that these guys, government opposition people, have this completely well set up and are here to do everything at the same time as having a literal Western propagandist here to film this, just perfectly hits at the exact same time and is completely unimpeded in terms of his access to this. This is being used to justify increased government airstrikes in Syria, which most people should be concerned about here. The fact that the news anchor crying was one of the most contrived cries I've seen on anything since I saw Obama shed his one fake tear for the children of Sandy Hook. And I refuse to be budged by this fake emotion that they want to promote through this, because even if this is a completely, as far as the victims here, not staged event, at very least the political opportunists, the vultures as it were, have barely even waited for the dust to settle before they're trying to use another victim of war for their own political grist. That is at bare minimum. I think this is going to be by far our most controversial topic, as anybody that's heard me on Truth Sentinel before, especially the Orlando shooting broadcast that we did, episode we did, should know that I have a little bit of a different opinion on certain subjects like this, considering there are companies such as Crisis Cast and literally dozens of others that specialize in setting up, in literally filming false scenarios that they create with actors and actresses in what they call moulage, which is painting up people with realistic looking wounds. I would encourage anybody to look up crisis acting companies, just so you can see some of the videos of this stuff. And I understand that some people take this too far, to the point that they say, like, decisively that every single event must be staged. I think that's a way too far and ridiculous. However, one has to understand people being pushed to having that extreme of an opinion, because how do you really trust anything a group of serial liars has told you your entire life? I mean, so much stuff of the Iraq War, of the first Gulf War there, with Saddam Hussein and the incubator story, which is a complete lie. They have the nurse that's supposed to be there that's talking about he threw the babies out of the incubators and all this stuff, who's I believe connected to what is it, Kuwaiti royalty there, and we just no there's no conflict of interest in any of this. It's almost always built on lies. Justification for militarism in all these foreign countries are, I'd say 95 plus, more like 98% of the time, built on lies, literally founded upon lies. So one really has to question it. I think I'll have by far the most extreme opinion of anybody here in saying that there is a distinct possibility. I'm not saying definitively that this was 100% staged with actors and everything like that, but there is a possibility of it being staged with actors and stuff like that, because of the sheer amount of quote-unquote coincidences of all these people perfectly around that, who in the case of the quote White Helmets have a history of doing this before. At one point they used a film that had been shot by I believe it was a Swedish director. This has just been covered on the news recently, that these same exact guys, the White Helmets, take this footage from a film, something that was shot, I believe, on the Isle of Malta on a similar set to what they shot Gladiator and a few other movies like that are supposed to have that Mediterranean feel to them. Took that footage and said, with all these like headlines under or bylines under it and everything, that somehow this was a young boy that was charging machine gun fire and stuff to rescue a young girl from a Free Syrian Army or government-backed forces backed by Assad and stuff, that they were just trying to machine gun down children in the street and all this sort of ridiculous nonsense. And while they got called out for it, somehow nobody's supposed to be skeptical that this is the exact same group affiliated with this, which is now being referred to as the napalm boy of our lifetime. Which, think of that. They're trying to literally connect it with the evils of American imperialism in Vietnam with Bashar al-Assad in Syria. To conflate the two is, at very least, a disgusting misuse of logic, and at very worst, one of the nastiest deceptions you could possibly put across on people. And I'll give it up here. You guys can take it whichever way you want to, and see how we feel about this one.
You know, I'm sure the military do have their propaganda departments, and so I'm sure they're using social media to create the kind of scenarios and generate the kind of emotions in the population if they do want to have a war. Which I think when they do, they're going to have to do that kind of thing. So I don't think it's beyond the realms of reality that they will take advantage of events or stage them. Who knows? I wouldn't put it past them. And I think the problem is we've got a media that are quite happy to latch onto a story. So you can see that this film that Seth mentioned was latched onto by the media. It was only later they found out it was actually a part of a movie. You know, I think that's the problem we've got. We've got government departments that have a budget to create propaganda, and then you've got a media that don't fact check and spread stories, and then we've got social networks that can create viral stories as well, and viral videos. So I like to sometimes go more for this was a real event and it was taken advantage of, just because it's easier to swallow. But I wouldn't say it's totally out of the question to be staged either in some way or other. But Seth and Phil have to go at this point, so we're going to say goodbye to them, and Anthony's going to hang around for a bit longer. So we'll find out what he thinks about this in a moment. So thanks again, Seth. Always nice to chat to you, and I hope you'll join us again for another episode on whatever topic it may be.
You too, Scott. You guys have a great time. Thank you to everybody for listening, and anytime you'd like to have me come back and talk about whatever, we might be able to do a little bit of the news. I know a whole lot of that's been going on, and it was good to cover what we did. All right, you guys have a good day, and I'll talk to you later.
Phil, thanks again to you also for joining us. Been great having your contribution, and hope you have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, great to be here again and chatting to you guys about some interesting stuff. And take care.
Goodbye, and good luck with your permaculture. Now I know what it is. And then there were two.
Yep.
Now the other guys have left us, Anthony. It's just me and you, and I just wondered what you thought of the boy in the ambulance story.
To be honest, I cannot sort out the truth from the fiction of this story. It is so difficult to work out exactly what has happened here and what the purpose of it is. However, I think that the general point that Seth made about using media as a propaganda tool definitely stands. I mean, using it to change the mood of the people, to kind of beat the war drums, as they like to say. Many governments use the media of their countries. In the US, for example, the most sophisticated media available is Hollywood, and we know that it's been used to generate so-called news footage, and also to I guess you could say splice messages inside the plots of movies and other things like this. So I think I think there is reason to be a little circumspect about the official story here, and to wonder exactly how this video was created and for what purpose. I think also we need to hang a lantern on something very important that's happening. While the storm about the boy in the ambulance is occurring, there's been a significant development in the war in Syria, which is that there is now another major power involved in the war. We're talking about the last 24 hours here. Turkey has launched its first operation inside Syria. Its first major operation inside Syria. Turkey has essentially now entered the Syrian civil war. Now creates a level of instability and a level of potential for the war to widen that was not entirely absent before, but now is a reality. The war has effectively now widened. As this controversy has been going on about the photograph of the boy, and we need to be very, very concerned about that. Not least because Turkey has always had the idea that as much as going after ISIS, this is about going after the Kurds, and also about going after Assad. So Turkey is going after Assad, Russia is protecting Assad. Turkey's going after the Kurds, America is actively supporting the Kurds. We have a very explosive situation here, and it just became more explosive. I think it's worth drawing a line under that just to say, look, stuff is really getting, I mean, it was serious before, but it's getting, if it was possible, even more serious now.
I was going to add, we also, as well as an explosive situation, we'll have a very confusing situation. I don't think members of the public, including myself, really know who's bombing who here. We've got so many countries involved now. Which rebel groups are they bombing? Are they, have we almost got a sort of world war occurring here? You've got America, the UK, Turkey, Russia, Syria.
Don't forget France.
And France. And they're all bombing people. And I don't think members of the public are really sure who's bombing who and why.
Yeah, and their objectives are all different. I mean, it's a classic proxy war. The potential for major fallings out between powers is huge. I mean, we saw what happened last year when Turkey very, very stupidly shot down the Russian warplane, which had strayed into Turkish airspace for about 12 seconds at the most. They shot it down. And that was, months of horrible rhetoric on both sides, basically schoolyard rhetoric of, I'm going to get you from both Moscow and Ankara. Ankara even worse than Moscow because it was the little dog yapping at the big dog. And it was only last month that they managed to patch that up. And now Turkey is in the country supporting the people, trying to destroy the people that the Russians are trying to protect.
So you have to ask, what would happen if a battalion of US troops, that they say there aren't many out there, but there are some, or some military hardware, or a US jet was shot out of the sky by the Russians?
Well, let's see. It wouldn't be the first time. I think it would be, a very, very serious incident. I do think that it might be a resolvable issue because there is actually, there are so many airstrikes going on at the moment that you've got, you've got some fairly crowded airspace over Syria, and you might find that the government who does the shoot down, the government whose military does the shoot down might backpedal furiously and apologize and say, look,
I agree,
really
actually. I was going to agree with you on that. I think that's what may well happen. I was wondering if you can think of a scenario where it wouldn't be treated lightly, that it would actually be a major thing. I was thinking maybe if it was an accidental thing and it was acknowledged on all sides it was accidental, what if for some reason a deliberate shoot down occurred?
Okay. So for example, if it was an American shoot down of a Russian plane, the personality cult of Putin would demand that some kind of revenge is exacted, that Putin gets something back from the Americans out of that. So that would be a tricky one for him to pull off. If the Americans were saying, we're sorry, it was an accident, that's not going to play well with Putin's public, who want to see him being the strong man and not taking any crap from the West. He might need to exact more than the Americans are comfortable with giving him, and that could be a problem. But I think that the greater potential for a wider conflict would be a Russian-Turkish conflict. Historically, these guys have never been friends. They've always been sort of rival powers. They've been rival powers not on their own territory. There haven't been territorial incursions, but there have been squabbles over pretty much every piece of territory that lies between Turkey and Russia over the years. And at the moment, unfortunately, we have somebody in power in Russia who can't be seen to back down on any issue ever. And we have somebody in Ankara who is, quite frankly, really would be more appropriately placed in a mental institution than at the head of a national government. So I think the greater potential is there. If, for example, there's a repeat of the Turkish shoot down of the Russian plane and the Turks refuse to apologize, and we're talking about, now it's on Syrian territory, and they're saying, look, you come again tomorrow, we'll shoot you down again, then we have a real problem.
The other thing I wanted to bring up was, I think, another confusing situation, and one that has led to some conspiracy theories, the rebel groups, the funding of rebel groups by the US and other countries. It must be getting very confusing. I mean, even the group that beheaded the 12-year-old kid, they were allegedly funded by the US as well, and leading to a kind of, oh, you really shouldn't do that, we might take away your funding if we find out you were the group that we're funding. That was the official statement. It must be getting confusing as to who are the good guys, who are the good rebels. In fact, there probably aren't good rebels, are they? I mean, and some of them probably do form new coalitions. So I think there's been recent allegations that the US Department are directly funding ISIS now. I mean, some of these guys that certainly the guys that beheaded the kid. There's no difference between ISIS and them to me in ideology, or it certainly didn't seem any different. So it must be getting confusing as to whether you really can say that the US are funding dangerous extremist groups on the ground, and whether other countries are as well.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, they earlier, going back earlier in the war, they funded a group who was attacking Assad because that was their objective, and then some of that group splintered off and formed Islamic State, and then they funded another group to fight the group that they trained a year earlier. So it is a mess. I mean, look, it's one of the most complex system of alliances I think we've seen. I mean, we've seen wars where it's not just two sides fighting; it's kind of 3 or 4 or 5 groups who are shifting in their alliances. We're not talking about 3, 4, or 5 here. We're talking about literally hundreds of groups, and just trying to keep a handle on who is with whom and what their objective is and what their ideology is crazy. And that's the thing. There are two things here. There's objectives and there's ideology. So the Americans might choose to fund people who have, for example, a fairly radical Islamist ideology if their objectives are similar to the objectives of the US. That is, of course, very, very dangerous territory to get into.
I would say it's beyond a mess. I would say it's foolish to fund these groups and kind of irrational, and I'd even use the word stupid. And I saw Obama actually declare this, so this is no conspiracy theory. He said we're sending, and he listed the amount, and it was into the millions, perhaps billions, to these rebel groups in this war. These are literally the same kind of guys with the same mentality as ISIS. So that's just stupid, surely. I'm surprised that more people aren't up in arms about it.
I'm a little surprised as well. I don't know what the solution is, because at this point, I mean, we see that we can't just let Syria implode. Because of the number of refugees that the conflict is generating, and because of the amount of human misery that it's generating, we can't just stand back and let it implode. But how does anybody get involved in a constructive way? First of all, you have to have no vested interest, and that's never going to happen. I mean, if we're talking about the three major powers here: Russia, Turkey, and America, and also the Saudis are another power who have played an active role in the war. These people never get involved in any conflict in which they don't have a vested interest. So we can't expect that to happen. But even if it did happen, how do you resolve this in a satisfactory way? It's very, very difficult to see how it can be done.
I totally agree with you about the vested interest. I would say government, they just probably repeat that. Governments don't get involved in wars if there's nothing in it for them. And unfortunately, I think the vested interest is almost the only interest. Sadly, I really don't think the people that run our governments really have much humanity in them. I don't think they care about the average human being. So they certainly don't go into it because they've got a conscience, even though they pretend to. You've got people like Tony Blair often pretended that, we need to get rid of Saddam. He's an evil man. I agreed with him on that, actually. I think perhaps Saddam should have been taken out. Political assassinations apparently are illegal, but killing hundreds of thousands of people isn't. But I think it's their involvement in Syria is nothing to do with the official story about. Actually, what is the official story?
Well, good question. And then as I mentioned before, my enemy of the moment, we've got the French also carrying out airstrikes. What on earth are they doing? What is their objective? And again, what is their vested interest? I mean, we're seeing, at the moment, I mean, the president is suffering from incredibly low popularity figures, and arguably the only thing that's keeping him in place is the fact that he can occasionally stand up and look gallant and resolved when there are terrorist attacks in his country. And I am more and more of the belief that the government of that country are engineering a conflict at home, and that the Syrian airstrikes may form part of this great, engineering of the conflict. It's another.
I think you're joining the conspiracy side, because I think a war is being engineered here between Western powers and other countries. And there was even sign. Sometimes I think there's little signs that you can pick up on. Did you see the recent articles in Germany? Germans have been told to stockpile food and water in preparation for any coming disaster, and they're talking about bringing back conscription also, just in case there's a disaster. To me, that rings just slight alarm bells. It's the kind of thing that where governments don't want to. There's something going on behind the scenes, which a lot of these governments know is going to happen, and they kind of pretend that this is just like a risk assessment thing they've done, and so they can bring in these little measures. But it's actually because they know something's coming.
Well, absolutely. I think, these kinds of conflicts, be they real or be they engineered, they give governments license to do things at home that they would never normally get away with. I mean, France has been in a state of emergency since November. Now, the state of emergency offers the police force of a country a whole raft of powers that no police force normally has.
Like arresting women wearing bikinis on beaches.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, that's, it's tip of the iceberg. And the French population are not historically known for sitting back and letting the government do whatever it wants. They're great protesters, rioters. They have in the past been a great example of the fact that, like if you want the government to do anything for you, then you have to stop fearing the government and make the government fear the people. And now that has really been turned on its tail with this ongoing state of emergency. There's been, as far as I know, no discussion about ending it. It's now this is the permanent state in which French people are living. So I agree. These things sometimes have a motive which is quite abstracted away from the situation that we're tempted to discuss, which of course is the war in Syria. We're tempted to discuss how do we resolve. How can people resolve the conflict in Syria? And that's an important thing to discuss. But also, if you trace the motives back, you can see that the motives often begin far away from the conflict itself.
Just a final comment, which you can just give your final comment to, as we've run out of time now. I think there is really little public support for any major war, but I do have a feeling one's coming up. I really do get the feeling, which isn't very scientific again, I know. But it is based on things like the German article and what's going on in Syria and some other countries as well. I just wondered, how do you think they could possibly get public support? I mean, this is where, again, you have to wonder whether there's the possibilities of staged events or they allow events to happen. Because I think at the moment, public support wouldn't be for a major war and troops on the ground, etc. But if there was an incident that occurred, and I think the boy in the ambulance wouldn't be enough. It would have to be a major incident to get people to support this. A kind of incident that's so large that people would say, yes, we want you to go and attack and join the war in Syria or elsewhere because of what's just happened. And I think that thing that would just happen would have to be huge.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you look at it, okay, so another thing that's been happening this week is that Putin has been making public appearances in which he's been saying in a slightly different tone to what he normally uses. He's saying, "Oh, there's strange things going on our border with Ukraine. Or I don't really understand what's happening over there, but it looks like something weird's going on." He's doing this kind of messaging at the moment, and that he's not going to do that. He's not going to say that in public, even if it's occurring. He's not going to say it unless he's thinking, I want to send some people over. So the messaging is about saying to people, there's a threat, we will protect you from the threat. If you wanted to talk about that on a much larger scale, if you're talking about like a major war that you're predicting, then the messaging would be similar, but the threat would be larger. So it might be a nuclear threat, for example.
Yeah. Can you imagine a scenario? A nuclear threat wouldn't be enough, really, would it? I mean, what about a nuclear detonation?
Well, we know that that with nuclear arsenals, there are various states of readiness. Yeah. So just like you've got these silly terror alerts where the color changes and all that stuff. You also have stages of readiness for nuclear nuclear arsenals. Yeah. If you could convince your population that another power had just not hit the launch button, but flipped the switch from these things are just sitting in their silos doing nothing in particular to we're pushing them all into place ready for an attack. If you can convince your people that that's happening, that somebody else is gearing up for a nuclear attack on your country, then you may find it gives you a lot of support.
I think countries that come to mind about that would be Iran and Israel. I think Israel, if they were convinced that this new peace agreement wasn't working, that secretly Iran had developed a nuclear weapon, Netanyahu has already said if that occurred, they would have no choice but to strike. Probably they'd strike against the nuclear weapons rather than just launching a nuclear weapon against Iran. But that doesn't really, I don't know if that ties in with the Syria situation.
I really don't know. This is one thing that I'm not very knowledgeable about at all, which is what do the Israelis think about the conflict in Syria? It would be interesting to know. I actually have no information about that at all.
No, fair enough.
Which is a fascinating thing to say on a radio program, don't you?
No, because I think it's fine because when we're not sure about subjects, we go out and research them, and we'll probably try and cover that in some point in the future. I do get the feeling there is a coming war. I'm going to leave that conspiratorial statement floating in the air.
Yes, I can see it floating now, darkly and ominously.
Yeah, it's a cloud. I hope I'm wrong, though. I like being wrong, and let's face it, most of the time I usually am. Anyway, enough of our ramblings. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed the topics as far as you can, and will join us again at some point in the future.
It's been my pleasure as always, Scott. Thanks for having me on the show again.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for listening to today's show. We're always very appreciative that you take the time to listen to us. News that I'm just checking on at the moment. The uncle of a British woman who died in Pakistan in a suspected so-called honour killing has been arrested on suspicion of falsifying medical files. There's also allegations she was raped before being killed. And the people that are being accused are her ex-husband and family in Pakistan. And we're going to be talking again about honour killings soon. I've invited Jasvinder Singh Gira back. People who've been listening to Truth Sentinel for a while will remember that we chatted to Jasvinder Singh Gira many episodes ago, and she gave us a bit of an insight into honour killings because it's something that she talks on. She's done TED Talks on it. She's been heralded as one of the top most influential women in the world for the work she's done, her activism against honour killings and forced marriages. So she'll be coming soon. Also, we've got another guest coming on. Ralph Castaldo is a songwriter, martial artist. He's into Muay Thai. He's a fitness coach and a mystic that belongs to the ancient family bloodline of hereditary Strega. He runs his own podcast called Spiral Radio, and we're going to be chatting to him soon. And some of the stuff that he covers is similar to some of the topics that David Icke covers. If you're wondering what the ancient Strega are, I'm going to give you a bit of a sneak preview of our next week's episode. Here's Ralph Castaldo just explaining a little bit about what ancient Strega are. And I'm going to leave you this to play out the rest of today's episode. So thanks for joining us and have a good week.
Now, the ancient Strega is on both sides of my family, actually. And it's there's not many of us left. There's not many families left like this that have the hereditary bloodline passed down from generation to generation. What Strega are is, Strega is like another word for a good white witch, people say, but I don't like the word witch because people automatically think it might be something evil, or that there's a bad stigmatism that comes with that word. What I mean by witch, I mean by herbalists, healers, shaman, seers, we're dream prophets, cloud readers. It's everything that you would hear like in a shamanism or a medicine man. You know, it's ancient healers. And as it gets passed down from in the bloodline, it gets stronger and stronger as it goes. You know, each generation it gets stronger if the blood remains in that same bloodline and it remains that hereditary strongness. It gets really strong over the years. And unfortunately, in my family, I'm the last of my full-blooded. You know, because even I married a Mexican lady. She's not She's Mexican and Puerto Rican, so it's very hard to find someone who's actually an Italian Strega with those genes. So the Strega have been going back in thousands of years in the area that we originated from. And the area that we're from it's called Lake Nemi, and it's alongside Benevento, Italy. And this is 19 miles from Rome, from the Vatican. So it's like we're right under the nose of the Inquisition the whole time, like right under. And, you know, they saw us as a threat. Meanwhile, they took most of our practices and most of our worship rituals and everything that we've done, they took from us and just made it their own. Even a big figure in Strega beliefs is Saint Anthony. To us, he was the wizard saint. You know, he became a Catholic saint after that. So the Strega alongside Lake Nemi. Lake Nemi is an old volcanic crater that's millions of years old. And now it's a lake. It even has like wild strawberries growing alongside of it. And it's in the Alban Hills. And like I said, it's 19 miles from Rome. And it's like Italy's best kept secret. Nobody really talks about it. Nobody, they don't want a lot of tourists there. You know, they don't put it in a lot of, you know, tourism maps and stuff like that. It's well kept secret. And there's ancient temples of the moon goddess Diana alongside of the ruins are there still alongside of Lake Nemi. And they've been there for thousands of years. And which my family, you know, what we specialize is dream prophets, and we're also cloud readers, and we've been protecting ancient secrets regarding Lake Nemi. And what I say by Astrega, I mean the practice of the old ways. It's moon worship, sun worship. We worship nature and all the gods and goddesses in the cosmos. You know, there's the god and the goddess. We don't just believe there's one of all. There's one creator, you know, and the creator is not like what the Bible is. It's not a physical being. The creator of everything is a universal consciousness. It's what holds the fabric of everything together. It's a universal consciousness. Like I said, that's what created us all. And a physical being, like what they describe in the Bible, where God is getting involved with things on earth, that is not the creator. That's some other God they're talking about. The creator is a consciousness, and it can't get involved with certain aspects of people on earth, because if it did, then everything would unravel. The space and fabric of time would unravel. Volcanoes would explode. Everything would just unravel. It wouldn't hold us all together. The universal consciousness is bigger than that. It's bigger. It's everything. It's in everything. It's in the clouds. It's in you. It's in me. It's in the stars. It's everything, you know, that created us all. At the beginning of time, there was particles of light and dark, and they collided. And, you know, the good God of the light, it remained out there somewhere in the cosmos, but the darker God, you know, it created matter, and it made us on this material plane trapped, you know. But we are not trapped in that sense. We can explore our consciousness. And that's what the Strega is about. Exploring beyond the five senses. Society has suppressed us deliberately, putting a veil over our third eyes, like our pineal glands. And we are not limited to five senses. We can go beyond that. We can explore our consciousness. We can explore the astral realms.